Yo, 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 what is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, Luke, here with our Round 3 live stream for the PGA Championship. Going to get you ready for all of your moving day exposure with a look at some of the strategy for tomorrow, a weather report as well, how that'll impact play for Saturday, as well as any questions down in chat and some player pool stuff as well. So we're going to get you ready for everything that you need to have yourself a successful slate. And today ended up being a really good one for yours truly. Had a few people in my community takedown contest today, which I didn't have a takedown, but the next best thing is for people that subscribe to my page. They go out there and do that for me, and ended up being a profitable day for my exposure. So if I can win some money, people in my community can go out there and win first prize, that kind of thing, I'm going to be pretty satisfied with it. So hopefully you guys out there were able to take advantage yourselves. If not, we still got a couple other rounds to get you guys towards the top end of the leaderboards. And Saturday, moving day, should be a good day to get it started. We got ourselves what looks like a very spicy forecast, a leaderboard that seems to be shaping up a little bit better than what it was after Thursday. My main slate exposure is going to be average at best, I'd say, on a week like this, but that's what I love about Showdown. So we got Goku down there already, Wayne as well. We got Alan, who says, I'm the GOAT, and he says, thank you for all that you do. I appreciate people like Alan that show up to all these live streams. Goku, a regular, how we see Wayne in a lot of these as well. Thank you guys for being the best community out there. So speaking of, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. But let's start with a look at the golf course, which today played flat across the board. Wasn't really a difference between the morning and afternoon scoring, about 4/100ths of a stroke difference. So I would say next to no real difference there, which was kind of predictable with the weather forecast looking flatter, but I thought it might be closer to like 0.1, 0.2 shots. Either way, didn't really matter which side of the draw you played. And that's how I went out there and built my player pool. I didn't really take one side or the other in terms of the draw, and ended up being the right kind of strategy for today. What was more important was going after fading a lot of that chalk and trying to find your poppers, which in terms of today, I played a lot of them in my player pool. I wish I would have had some Siwoo Kim, or else I would have had a few more takedowns, but Max Homa was one of my best plays of the day. You mentioned Joaquin Niemann yesterday as one of the guys I wanted to get over the field on. Bryson DeChambeau was also one of my better plays of the round. Garcia, Corey Connors were players that I was using in my player pool, and a lot of bounce back guys. Like Corey Connors was over par after the first day. Sergio Garcia shot +4, then went out there with that -3. That's the power of getting to bounce backs. And, even a Joaquin Niemann, he went out after shooting +3 and shot -4 today. In Max Homa, if you didn't take a shot on those guys that were over par, the players that were bounce back candidates, as some would say, again, +2 was the scoring average for round number 1. You wouldn't have gotten on to a lot of these kind of players. So that's normally the case for round 2 Showdown. You see a lot of those bounce back performances. And up here at the top, there was really no one outside of a Matt Fitzpatrick that was chalky that ended up having a low round. So outside of some of your studs like a Scotty that are always going to get that ownership, your mid to lower tier players that had the spike performances were for the most part relatively low owned. So that's part of the reason why I had a pretty good day with my exposure. Anytime the chalk busts for the most part, it's going to be a good day. And that's how I build my player pool as well. So it kind of makes sense that my community would have had such a good day on a day like this because I'm so, stringent about making sure to avoid that chalk. Now for tomorrow, the ownership trying to target one side versus the other is, I think, going to be a much harder thing to go and break down because we've got ourselves a really nasty weather forecast. The entire day, it looks like it's going to be a lot gustier than rounds 1 and 2. In fact, in the afternoon, you got sustained winds closer to 20 miles an hour and wind gusts closer to 30 miles an hour, even 40 miles an hour as a little bit of a front comes through the area. So what you'll see on some of these other forecasts is some of them are calling for that storm to come through, and some of them aren't calling for any kind of a rain. So this is for the Pineville, which is the same area as what you have this golf course in. And what you'll see tomorrow morning is that they're not calling for any sort of rain. It's just cloudy in this forecast, and the sustained winds are lower. It's closer to 6-7 miles an hour in the morning on this kind of a weather model, whereas in the afternoon it jumps up to about double that, to about 13-15 miles an hour sustained. And if you click on these and if you can find one that has the wind gusts on it, it's like 25-30 mile an hour wind gusts. So it tends to agree with the PM side of this HRRR model, but this rain coming through, if that dodges the area and it ends up being calm, pretty pristine conditions for the morning hours, there could be a massive difference with the scoring. Not like the first 2 days where it was 4/100ths of a stroke. Round 1, it was like 0.3 strokes between the two different sides. if we have no wind for the morning guys, and again, this is assuming that we're getting two sums off of one, because of this potential weather situation, there's the off chance they decide to go in three sums off of both sides. It's a major championship, so they're going to do their best to avoid that situation at all costs. It's kind of like the lift clean in place. It's sacrilegious to do it when you have one of the four majors on the line. But if they're going off on two sums off of one, and we're going to look at some of the other weather models on here as well, I think there could be a distinct advantage to stacking those earlier starters. And if it is two sums off of hole number one, that means it's going to be the guys that just made the cut that are going off first. And there's a lot of legit players that are just on that cut line. I'm thinking about a Xander, a Rory McIlroy in particular. They're going to be some of the first three groups off if they have those kind of tee times. You've also got your Sam Burns of the world. I think he made the cut. We'll have to double check on his last few holes there. But a lot of legit players in that 7-8K range that you could throw into lineups. And the reason why I think that, reason why I even thought to look at some of these other weather models to begin with is if you take a look at like this HRRRDS, you can see in the morning they're calling for lower winds and no rain coming through. This NEM model also a little bit calmer in the morning than what you have in the afternoon, and none of that precipitation. Now, some of them even have precipitation in the afternoon. So this is the kind of forecast that kind of scares me into thinking they might do threesomes. But hopefully at some point during this live stream, we can get the starting times for round three. And I'm even going to check right now, so they haven't posted them quite yet. If it is those two sums off of one, at least as of the current forecast that we're looking at here, I think I'm targeting these morning guys for a lot of my leverage. And because it's a round three showdown slate, it's not round four where you have to prioritize guys towards the top. That might be 3-4 players at least per lineup that I'm using towards the middle to the beginning end of tee times, just to make sure I'm getting those low-owned players. So this is the kind of weather forecast that we're really going to have to keep an eye on. The GFS model, which by the way is one of the more reliable out of the 4 or 5 that we have on here. Same thing with HRRR. It's why we can't completely dismiss this forecast at hand. This one's also calling for some rain, but if it's rain without thunderstorms in the morning and low winds, I would rather have players that are playing in a little bit of a drizzle and no wind than going off later when it's blowing 30 miles an hour. So it's a hard one to break down, as I was saying off the bat, but at least as of the information that I have right now, it would be the morning guys that get the slightly better side of it. But if you're somebody that's playing DFS, don't take that as the absolute gospel. You're going to have to check up on this on yourself. And even if we take this information and it ends up holding up throughout the entire night, it's not the kind of advantage where you're only going after morning guys. There are going to be some later starters that make sense to mix in. I've already started building my player pool, and I can tell you right now that there are later starters that I'm planning on using already. Just because it might be a half a stroke to a stroke difference doesn't mean that you have to take yourself off of guys that really fit the things that you're looking for in round three. So we're going to talk about the things that I'm looking for in my player pool tomorrow. It's mostly what we typically have on these streams: ball strikers, short game regression guys, high upside players, but I'm also looking for some wind players. It's worth noting with this forecast that it's going to be a different set of conditions than what you've had for the first few days. Not to say that the shots gained metrics aren't as impactful, but if somebody's known for being a really good wind player, a mutter, whatever the case may be, some of these guys that have played well in open championships before, DP World Tour guys that have won on nasty conditions, might be worth a few extra looks over here for moving days action. So the weather going to be a hot topic, something that if you plan on playing the slate at all, you should be at least setting an alarm tomorrow to go out there and check it, because it could have a rather drastic impact on the strategy involved. What's going on to Peach? Welcome on in. We got Brian down there too. The lovely jubbly meme is one of the most legendary that we have out there. I said, what the hell got into Lukey Glove's approach game? He gained like 5 strokes approach today. So I was going hole by hole sites. I thought he might have holed out or something, but nope, just good old darts over and over again. So he's a flusher for sure. And cheers to him. He got some coffee tonight, by the way. Still taking it easy. He said Scotty was the best donkey. Yeah, he was high owned, but I played Scotty today, so I'm kind of glad that he had himself around. He said, keep up the good work. I appreciate you, Ed. Spicy conditions for sure. And then he said, do I play any weekend only contests? I don't myself, Jake. So something that I don't have a bunch of experience with. I kind of get what to do with the strategy, but I don't have enough like field test. Like I literally have never played a weekend contest before to feel really good about giving advice. But if you have any specific questions, I guess I can give it a go, but not something that I play a whole lot of in my exposure. Let's go through what I'm looking for in my player pool. And I do want to refresh this one more time just to see if we have the tee times, and they haven't posted those quite yet. Again, those two sums off of one are really what I'm hoping to see so that we can find some leverage towards the bottom. But what I'm going to focus on next would be the shots gained metrics. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh this so that we have everything up to date. And we're going to look at the ball striking stats first. And just like round number one, I like to take a look at who was hitting the ball well today to try and find some low owned pivots. And, your Max Homas of the world that had a spike performance both with his approach play and with his short game categories, maybe not the best option for it because as a top 5 player, he's going to be a little bit higher owned than some of the guys around him. But a Nikolai Højgaard, who's T36 at this point, about the middle end of guys that are making the cut, he gained 4 strokes approach today, but lost nearly 2 strokes in the short game category. So he'd be the sort of guy that I'd be looking to for a bounce back from. Corey Connors, same thing. He was very average in the short game, but gained nearly 4 strokes on approach. JJ Spawn, you could say that about, but these kind of guys that had spike performances and are in the top 20, like a Spawn is going to get some ownership steam. So same thing with Corey Connors because he's in the 8-9K range. Those guys in general, just by default, are going to get a lot of that ownership. And something worth noting about this slate in general, I've already started working on my ownership projections for my slate. It's worth noting that towards the top, that there's not a bunch of guys that made the cut in the 8K range. In fact, the 8K range has 5 players in total. So all of those guys are going to have ownership. Corey Connors is one of them. That's why I wanted to point this out. And even your low-owned guys in the 8K range are going to be at least like 13% owned. And your 9K guys are also getting a little bit more steam than you would expect, mostly because of all the chalk that ended up missing the cut. So that happens sometimes when we have these round 3 slates and the pricing comes out beforehand. DraftKings doesn't expect a lot of the top end of the board to be missing rounds 3 and 4. So when that happens, we get really big gaps in the pricing. And because people on DraftKings always spend all of their salary, I don't want to say always, but within like $300, $400 of the max is what like 99% of lineups utilize in every single contest. Because we know that, that these guys are going to get played a lot more than the 7K players. So for example, the 8K guys are even like the top end of the 7K range. So your Keegan Bradley's at 7,900. Same thing with Johnny Vegas, Cam Davis, who all have pretty respectable scores so far this week. They're also getting a lot more steam. But if you go just a little bit further down the board, so the middle end of the 7K range, which by the way, the 7K range is massive for round 3 showdown. Like you have like 8-9 times the players in the 7K range as to what you have in the 8K range. The ownership is much, much more spread out. So that's something to know before we even go through these shots gained metrics, is that like a Corey Connors, he might look really good on paper. And in fact, I'm using him in my player pool. I already have him down as a yes for the ball striking in my kind of exposure. But I really like the 7K guys for that leverage because there's so many more options and the ownership is going to be so much more spread out. So if you're going to play an 8K guy like a Corey Connors, I would say just really like them. Even one of these lower 9K players like a Fleetwood, Xander, Rahm, all those guys like between $9,000 and $9,500, they're also the lowest owned in that range is 18% in my projections. I'm not kidding you. 18% is the lowest owned player that you have in that range. And that's Joaquin Niemann in my projections. If anyone was curious about the specific player, that range, like no matter who you use, you're going to have ownership on it. So up top, it's kind of just play your guys is what I'm saying here. Like if you like a Tommy Fleetwood, despite him being one of the more popular players on the slate, I've got him over 20%. Then use a Tommy Fleetwood because the pivot around him, Joaquin Niemann, is like 2% lower owned. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at there. And then even up top, I've got Scotty at nearly 40% projected ownership. So he's going to be the guy that most people are clicking. I've got Bryson at 21%. I've got Rory McIlroy at over 25% projected ownership. So even if you like Scotty, the ownership shouldn't be the reason for hopping off of him. And the only pivots that I see towards the top end of the board, and there's only one of them actually, is Colin Morikawa. Colin Morikawa, because he's been very average to this point, kind of going under the radar, I've got at sub 15% ownership. Of the other guys that are $8,500 and above, there's not a single player that is below 15% projected owned. So that's something I wanted to bring up with my projections on the side, because this slate and the ownership up top in general is just so convoluted. It's an unfortunate side effect of when you have all those guys missing the cut, but everyone has to deal with it. So just kind of know that ahead of time. Let's go through a few other plays here with the ball striking that might make some sense. I like to try and find some short game regression candidates, but all these guys in general that gained with the ball striking are going to be players that I'd be considering. Joaquin Niemann, right? We mentioned him on yesterday's stream. He also gained nearly 3 strokes putting. So I don't know if I'd count on him to do that in back-to-back rounds, but it is good to see that the ball striking has been, there for the first 2 days at this point. There's the Lukey Gloves round that we were talking about in chat before. There's 5 shots gained to the positive. A Tony Finau was also really solid in both ball striking categories, about a neutral with the short game. So the kind of player that I'll be using in my exposure. The other thing to note is that if you can find these guys that have good shots gain metrics and that are good wind players, and there's a really good chance that I'm using them. And for example, Corey Connors, he's been, at least from what I've noticed over the years on tour, he's played well when you've had some windy conditions. Makes sense because he's a low spin player. And Tony Finau, the same thing. He's had a lot of low rounds when you've had these windy conditions. He had a pretty low round today. It's respectable round 1 too, but I don't think he's going to be mega chalky. For example, Tony Finau in my projections, because he's in the $7,000 range, if he was in the $8,000 range, Tony Finau would probably be nearly 20% out. I shit you not, because there's not that many guys to choose from in the 8K range. But because he's $7,500 for tomorrow's showdown, and you've got just a million guys around him in the pricing, there's just 10 guys in either direction that are within $300, $400 of his price tag. There's just too many players to use in that range for him to be that kind of mega chalk. So that's why I like a Tony Finau who has that win prowess and has these kind of shots gain metrics. Just something that you might want to add on top of your process too. And you'll see, if you guys are a part of my Patreon page and you guys are downloading my sheets later, you're literally going to see that there are players that I'm using that are just good wind players. Tony Finau's more the ball striking that I like, but if you can find that and the wind, then that's even better. Like I said, a few other players that kind of stand out, you got to make sure that they made the cut. So Fishburne, Jordan Spieth, it would have been great if they made it through the weekends, but that's not going to be the case. Sergio Garcia, though, was great with the ball striking today. It's going to be right on that cut line. So if it ends up being the 2 sums off of one that we're hoping for, he would be getting potentially the better side of conditions. And again, we got to add that potentially there, because that quote unquote weather edge is far from a for sure thing. But if it ends up being that the morning is calmer, then that could be great for Sergio Garcia, and he's throwing darts out there as well. And the other thing to know with these earlier players, and it goes without saying, but if you're new to PGA DFS, maybe it isn't as obvious, but these are your low-owned pivots as well. Because they're not playing as well, they're further down the leaderboard. T62, your 30s, 40s with your placement right now, those kind of guys aren't going to get nearly as much steam as your players starting in the top 5, top 10. For example, there's a reason why Scotty's nearly 40% projected owned in my projections. There's a reason why even a Rory now, a John Rahm who's under par, are going to be 20-25% ownership in GPPs tomorrow, whereas your Sergio Garcia is down in the 6-7K range. They're going to be sub 5% owned. And if you know anything about my process for rounds 2 through 4 showdown, when it comes to building lineups, it is all about trying to find that leverage. And in particular for rounds 2 and 3 when we don't have the placement points. Nicholas Norgard Muller would have also been a really good play to have make the cut, but you can see he's there at +3. So, but shots gained profile would have been really good on that sort of guy. Daniel Berger continues to lose shots gained to putting in every single round, yet from tee to green is an absolute monster. So if you're a believer in that coming around, you can still use them. I've played him every round for the last few tournaments. He hasn't had a true spike performance, but he's been decent over that range. He's consistently been above average with the DraftKings fantasy score. So he's far from killed me when I've used him in some of those GPPs, but whenever he finds a way to just gain a few strokes putting, he's going to be the absolute nuts. So I'm going to continue to roll him out. This Marco Penge, Penge, sorry, that's how you say his name. I heard it on the broadcast today. He won on the DP World Tour before heading over here for this event. He lost 4 strokes putting today. So that's the kind of guy I'd be looking for a little bit of a bounce back from. Now, can we count on him to gain nearly 3 strokes around the green? Absolutely not. That's unsustainable. But he's also due to come around a little bit with the putter and that in a positive way. Taylor Pendrith here, he was about on neutral with the short game, but he gained over 2 strokes with the ball striking categories. I wouldn't be against looking at him in a few lineups. He is at T17 -3, so he might be getting a little bit more steam than some of the other guys around him. But the ball striking metrics are very favorable on that sort of player. And we're starting to get down to like the 2 to 1.5 shots gained range, where these guys aren't sticking out nearly as much. But in general, the higher your shots gained ball striking from today, the better they're going to project for tomorrow. And it's not the only thing I'm looking at, of course, but it's something that I add on top of a player's baseline. And the other thing I really like to focus on would be these short game categories. And it's for the exact opposite reason, because unlike the ball striking, your off the tee approach play, by the way, is what constitutes shots gained ball striking. Those categories are rather consistent from day to day and round to round. A player's golf swing, how they're actually hitting the golf ball, is something that they can maintain for even months at a time out here on tour. And it's not like every single round they're hitting the ball the exact same, but in general, if they're gaining strokes to the field, there's players that even do that for years at a time. Like Scotty Scheffler, for example, he gains ball striking almost every single week. These sort of players can normally keep it going. However, the short game, so the around the green and the putting is what constitutes shot gain short game, are much more variant. Getting the ball in the hole, a lot of it requires luck on the greens, getting the right sort of bounces on the greens, getting the right sort of putts where you're not putting downhill all day with sliders. Putting uphill directly into the slopes is a massive part of actually making birdies. And on top of that, if you're chipping and you're chipping in multiple times during a round, that is almost entirely luck. And you could say it's skill, sure. If you're a better chipper, you're going to make more chips from around the green. But even the best chippers of the ball have to have a lot to go their way for the ball to find the bottom and actually to make a birdie or an eagle. So these sort of guys that gained a whole bunch of strokes in these categories are not the kind of players that expect to do it in back-to-back days. So Siwoo Kim, he's ripping darts on the golf course now. He had the hole-in-one on a ridiculously hard par 3. Super impressive stuff. But it's kind of fool's gold if you look at his round today. He gained over 4 strokes putting. A lot of the shots gained approach. In fact, over almost all of it. In fact, 2.2 strokes in one shot over there on hole number 6. So that's the reason why he looks so good. In reality, he lost strokes on approach on every single hole other than that one hole at 6. He gained all of his strokes with the short game, and that's not something that Siwoo Kim does very often. Some of these guys missed the cut that gained a whole bunch of strokes putting, but Sim Stevens, for example, that also gained nearly 2 strokes around the green, like he's a fade for me tomorrow. Jake Knapp, if he had made the cut, right, he's the kind of guy I'd potentially want to fade as well. And a Grazerman, though it's a great story that he made the cut on the number. He threw a dart on 18, made a 5-footer to make it to the weekend. He was all short game today, and he lost 3 strokes off the tee, nearly 4 strokes in that category. That feels a little bit worrisome to me. So these short game categories are things I'm looking to fade. Around the green, the same thing. So a Fleetwood, a Penge, as I was pointing out before, players that got a little bit lucky there. And Cam Davis, by the way, just to do a little bit of a case example here on Cam Davis. Let's look at Cam Davis the first few rounds. So first round, he gained 6 strokes putting. We mentioned that he's due to come back down to earth, right? He gained 6 strokes putting. You're not going to do that the next day. But what did he do today? He lost 3.4 strokes putting. Now, the around the green was still there. He gained 2.4 strokes in that category. But tomorrow, it's highly unlikely that he's going to do that either. And because he struggled with the ball striking, this shots gained profile is kind of exactly what we thought would happen. He had that really good round 1, but he did it in an unsustainable fashion. And now he came back down to earth. So I point that out to show you an example of this short game actually happening in practicality. And let's look at Johnny Vegas too. And I don't even know what his shots gained profile looked today, but look at this. He lost 0.67 shots gained putting today. Round 1, he gained 3.77. So these guys in round 2, just to go back to the top end of that list, that are gaining a punch in both of these categories, like even a Rory is a little bit of a red flag. Pavon for sure, that gained well over 4 strokes in these 2 categories, are players that are likely not going to do that again. And on the flip side, you can take a look at the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes in these categories to try and find a bounce back, but you've got to marry it up with good shots gained metrics. So for example, like a Cam Davis, his ball striking was very average today, whereas a Marco Penge, sure, he's the same kind of thing around the green, by the way, right? He got a little bit lucky in that category, but lost with the putter. Look at his ball striking, though. He gained over 2 strokes between the 2 ball striking categories, as opposed to Cam Davis, who lost in those 2 categories. So if I was going to look for a short game regression candidate, give me a Penge over a Cam Davis. Also, because Penge is lower owned, he's not no one really knows who he is, so no one's going to use him. I only know of him because I watch the DP World Tour at times. And the other thing on top of it is that Penge is way cheaper. He's towards the very bottom end of the pricing of guys who made the cut, and he opens up a lot more salary towards the top end of the board. But other examples of players that you'd use for a little bit of short game regression, right? Daniel Berger, he's a player that was solid with the ball striking, but lost those 2 strokes around the green. Benny Ann would be another short game regression candidate that I'd be considering for my lineups. That's how I use the shots gained metrics to my advantage. And it doesn't have to be the exact same process that you guys use for your lineups. Everyone should kind of have their own, quirks, their own little things that they throw into their process that makes it different than others. But incorporating some of the things that we talk about here together could be a really good idea. A few other ideas for tomorrow's slate. You got the wind players, which I'm throwing on top of this. High upside players, so guys that make a whole lot of birdies or are good par 5 scorers. A lot of times when we have windy, harder conditions, I go to those sort of guys because like a lot of your scoring on a windy day happens on the par 5s. When you can try and get it up near the green, get up and down for birdies, the drivable par 4 is going to be a source of a lot of your birdies for tomorrow. So you can look for some of those bombers to take advantage of those holes. And then you can look at round 3 historical. The stone on SHIPIT Nation, that has the round 3 historical on it. You can use that to your advantage on that website as well. SHIPIT, stone, what else do you have on there? You have the approach series, the putting series that you can use, bounce back rounds. They have that category on there as well. So if you want to try and find somebody that maybe struggled round 2 for a bounce back tomorrow, all of those tools are things that you can add on top of that process to even further refine your player pool. And I'm sure there's a million things on top of that you can incorporate as well. Like you could look at poetrivalous putting. That's the surface for this week. And try and find guys that can pop and try and have those 3-4 shots gained putting. You can try and find good course history guys, right? That's something that I do a lot of times in my process. Try and find guys that play well around the Quail Hollow. There's a million different things you could use to find players for your player pool. The key is, and this is really the key here, is to have a reason for playing guys in your player pool. That's something that I preach a bunch here on this channel, my channel, wherever I'm doing content when it comes to Showdown, is you should never be randomly using players. Even after the cut line, when we have like 70, I think 75, 76 guys, they're going to end up making the weekend. You have enough pivots where you shouldn't just be taking guys because they're low owned, because there are enough low owned players on the slate where you can make that kind of thing happen. Now, having a website, having projections that you can count on when it comes to the ownership is also a really key factor of being able to profit for your round 3 showdown process. So my website, sites like SHIPIT Nation that have the best ownership projections in the industry are key for going out there and doing so as well. So if your website isn't giving you reliable ownership projections, which I got to say yesterday, I saw some ownership projections around the industry that were laughable up top. Like people projected for like 10% ownership that came in at 25 to 30%. With your guys in like the 9-10K range. If you were a part of a website that had projections like that were just like 2-3x off, right? Consider joining a site like mine or the SHIPIT Nation that is at least like when we're gonna get things wrong. I get things wrong all the time with ownership. You're never gonna be perfect when you're running that sort of thing, but at least be in the ballpark, right? Don't be like 2-3x off on like the key players on the slate that you're trying to leverage, or else people that are using your website are going to have like 20% of like, let's say a Scotty Scheffler and think that they have massive leverage to the field. And when they don't out there in a lot of those contests. So that's my rant about projections, making sure that you guys are a part of a good site. My site, SHIPIT Nation crew are the best in the biz. So nothing but nice things I can say about either sites. And let's catch up on any player pool questions you've got down in chat. So where we leave off, said, how are we feeling about Matty in the wind? So do you mean Matt Fitzpatrick? If you do mean Matty Fitz, he tends to play well in the wind. You saw that when he won the U.S. Open. Conditions were pretty nasty, especially on Saturday, Sunday as well around that golf course. A few other guys, I mean, a lot of your DP World Tour Europeans, not all of them, but like a Norn tends to be a little bit of a mutter. Tommy Fleetwood is known for that at times as well. A lot of guys you could say that about. You said, definitely appreciate my tips and knowledge. I appreciate you, Jay, the football nerd. Thank you down there in chat. You said, doesn't PFE look cheap with the, I don't know what you're saying. We got a spammer in chat. Good thing I stopped reading. This guy's we'll ban you and send you on your way, you bot. What, we're trying to sell stocks in chat or something? Come on now. We got Kirk and Harmon for a deep dive. Let's do it together. So Harmon, not a name I was expecting to see, but definitely one we'll go through. It gained in the ball striking categories, but lost short game. which for a player of his short stature is extremely surprising. He's one of the best short game players that we have on tour. So he's not my favorite course fit because of his lack of distance off the tee, but this stat profile is like a 7.5 out of 10. It's favorable. And then you're also wanted to look at Captain Kirk. So Kirk, another shorter player that maybe isn't my favorite course fit, but the same kind of stat profile going on where he gained 2 strokes approach, he gained a little bit off the tee, but lost a stroke with the flat stick. Yeah, and for a GPP flyer, I would like those sort of plays. I wouldn't be using these shorter hitters in a lot of my cash lineups. I wouldn't be using them in like my single entries either, to be frank, just because with the windy conditions, I really think the par 5s and the scoring on that drivable par 4s, that's 14 and hole 8, both of them are going to be reachable for some of your longer players. I think that that's really what I want to focus on from the scoring perspective. But large field GPPs where Kirk's, your Harmons are going to be super low owned. Like Kirk is right on the cut line. Where's Harmon at? He's there at T62 as well. Super low owned players that you could use in GPPs to get infinite leverage to the rest of the field. So I like them for that. Benny Ann, is he a good wind player? I don't know too much about the wind stuff with Benny Ann, but we'll look at the shots gained metrics. He gained 1.5 strokes approach and then lost the 2 strokes putting. So yeah, that short game regression candidate we were pointing out before. I'm not so sure about the win stuff with Benny Ann. I try and only use that narrative on players where I really have seen it over the years. We have a pretty big sample size of what to work with, but he is a long guy off the tee. He can take advantage of the par 5s. He's got the drivable par 4s. He's got the length to take those on. I like him from that perspective. Like he's got that bomber mindset, which I think will help. He said, also, do I like Tom Kim and Hatton? So we'll look at the shots gained metrics, but they weren't really guys that were popping in my process. Tom Kim, gained mostly around the green, and the ball striking has been very suspect lately. Low owned play, I'll say. He's T62, so just like a few of these other guys, you would use him as a pivot play, but I'd rather have a Harmon or a Kirk over a Tom Kim because Tom Kim's also not the longest player, and those other 2 guys had better stat profiles. They're cheaper, and I think they're going to be lower owned. At least Kirk will definitely be lower owned than a Tom Kim will be. And then who was the other one? It was Hatton, right? You want me to look at? So Terrell Hatton gained in the short game categories, but lost in the 2 ball striking. Same thing with Hatton. He's just not the best stat profile, I would say. Round 1, though, it was completely different. It was the ball striking, the tee to green play that really carried him in round 1. I actually like Hatton a little bit more than what you had there with Tom Kim, but I'd have to say that Hatton's probably like a 6 out of 10 for me. It's the upside. It's the fact that he's a live golfer. It's not like I think the live golfers are better than the PGA Tour guys. It's just that I know that plenty of them are talented, like Hatton, Neiman, Rahm, Bryson, all of them world-class players, and on the PGA Tour would be top 10 players likely at the end of the year. The thing is, a lot of the public doesn't treat them like that, right? They have that live golf bias. They refuse to give any of those players any credit whatsoever for how they play on that side of things. So Hatton's going to be lower owned than he should be because of that kind of public perception. So that's why I have him at like a 6, maybe even like a 7 out of 10 with my rating for tomorrow, just because he'll be a little bit lower owned than he should be. Luke, who is Penge, and can he keep this going? And he said, wind play angle, but you've never heard of him. He's won on the DP World Tour. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a look at what he's done over there. So he won a few weeks ago. I was not on him for this victory. I wish I was. He's a little bit inconsistent worldwide, but when he plays well, it's a 3rd at the South African Open. It's a win at the, I'm not even going to try and say it. It's an event in China, Hainan Classic. I did my best. But he's the kind of guy that pops out of nowhere, and like he'll miss cuts, he'll be very inconsistent. And then on the same week, he keeps it together. Like you can see here, he had the 1 bad round at the Irish Open, the 75 on Saturday. At the South African Championship, it was only a 3-round event. He ended up finishing 1 stroke off of what ended up being the lead there. I think you could keep it going. The shots gained profile, at least, is pretty favorable on him. Today, gained over 2 strokes with the ball striking, but the jury's out on that. He's a young, unknown prospect, that's for sure. He said, you saw plenty of SHIPIT guys on Showdown today, Berger and Hatton and Neiman. Yeah, absolutely, right? We mentioned a lot of those guys on live stream yesterday, whether it's my communities. I saw a lot of SHIPIT people have success today as well. A lot of the contests, I was going up against some SHIPIT guys towards the very end. It's great to be a part of the community, right? Being able to bring you guys these shows and to have success as a community as well. So we'll try and run it back for tomorrow. It'd be a lot of fun if we could do so. Let's talk about some contest selection next. So the contests available for tomorrow are about the same size as round number 2. So there's not going to be that much that we have to say here that's different. The big $25 GPP is the same top heavy contest. It's a 4th to 1st place. Let's go to the $5. So this one is also top heavy, and it's not my favorite contest. So for yesterday, it was an 8th to 1st place. It was $40K, and it was only $5K to 1st. Which is a better payout structure than the $10K out of $50K, because this one's 20% to 1st. It's not as top heavy as some of the other GPPs, but it's sub-ideal compared to what we typically have. A lot of the contests that you'll see me in would be the single entry. So like this 30K long drive, this is a pretty decent payout structure. It's a 6th to 1st place. So not quite ideal, but that 18% is better than some of the other contests that you're going to see on here. This one is 15% to 1st place. So it's a relatively flat payout structure for that top 5, top 10 as well. So it's the usual here. I mean, if you've been following the channel for a while, you've heard this spiel a million times before. But the reason why we want these contests where it's not like 30% to 1st place is so that there's some money left over if you don't have the absolute nuts. And especially if you're like in the big GPPs, like the big $5 or $25, you've got to be 10,000 to 20,000 entries to take that sort of thing down. And to do so, you have to have the perfect lineup. If you build a lineup that has 3, 4 absolute nuts plays for tomorrow, but one of your last 2 puts up like 10 to 15 DraftKings points, that's still a really good lineup. You had nearly a perfect performance for your Saturday exposure. Just because you didn't have the nuts, if you entered like that big $25, you might only win like 5x your entry fees. Whereas if you took that lineup, you were in a contest that had a flatter payout structure, 5th place might be closer to 10x your total entry fees for the day. If not, if it's in a single entry where you might even win 1st place for having that sort of a lineup. So that's the idea with entering these contests. It gives you a better chance long-term to sustain your bankroll, because it's very hard to have the absolute nuts, to have the perfect lineup to take down a contest against 20,000 other people. It's going to happen a lot more often where you have a lineup that's really, really good, but not quite the absolute nuts. Being able to make those pay off are really the key for having fun in DFS long-term. The next thing we'll go over would be the lineup construction, which just like round 2, it's making sure we have enough leverage in our lineups. The one thing I'd say on top of it is that weather edge. I guess we're going to have to see how much you want or how little we want to lean into that sort of a thing. But in some lineups, if it's going to be this kind of weather forecast that we're looking at now, I'm just going to stack 6 guys going off early. Now, that's only going to be in some lineups that I enter, like maybe 10 to 25% of my large field GPP lineups that I'm entering. My cash lineups, though, are probably not going to be built in that way. Like my high dollar stuff, like the big $100 single entries that I'm entering, $33 single entries, where I'm only entering against like a couple hundred other entries, I'm probably not going to go all in on that kind of a stack. So in those kind of builds, I'll probably have 2, 3 of those guys as leverage towards the bottom, but I might still use a Rory McIlroy up top. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say like a Rory McIlroy up top. I still might use like a Scotty Scheffler or a Bryson DeChambeau towards the top end of the board. That's going off a little bit later because of how well they're playing this week. So just to kind of show you an example of that, where you're sort of using the weather edge, but you're not going all in because you still want to play some of the guys that are playing good golf. Let's throw in a Bryson DeChambeau as our first man in. Then let's throw in somebody going off a little bit earlier as our second man in. And a lot of these guys missed the cut, so there's not a whole bunch to choose from. But a Daniel Berger, for example, at $8,200, he's the kind of guy that's teeing off relatively early, and the ball striking stats were pretty favorable on him. Who else could we throw in here? Not a whole bunch of guys that are on the cut line, but Xander Schauffele at $9,300. He's somebody who just made it through the cut line on this mid 7K range. So that's really our first pivot here, but it's a 9K range player. So it's not really an ownership pivot that we've thrown in. That's why it is so key with these 7K range players to make sure that you're looking at some of those earlier starters, whether it's the weather edge or just trying to make sure that you have some differentiation. That's going to be key from multiple fronts. So let's consider a Jaeger. Jaeger's got the early tee time, and he's due for a lot of short game regression. He just could not buy a putt out there today, which was to my advantage. I faded him on a birdie line, so I won't complain about him having a lot of trouble getting the ball in the hole. But in this range, I'm also looking for a pivot. So because our top 3 players I'll have some ownership behind him. Like even a Daniel Berger, I've got getting some ownership because he's in that 8K range. And as I was saying before, guys, that 8K range is just getting hammered with the ownership. So pretty much no matter who you use there, like there's not even really a pivot to point out. Let's throw in a Puig, who's about average to slightly below average ownership at that portion of the board. And then for your last minute in here, we can't build a whole lineup together because it's against the DraftKings terms of service. You might even want to consider another pivot to throw in because that's where the weather edge is at. And it's just going to give you even more leverage in your lineups. So I am building with that weather edge in mind, at least as of right now, right? I got to throw out that asterisk a million times because every time I do one of these live streams and I mention a potential weather edge, somebody just goes all in on it. And then afterwards is like crying down there in chat. Like I said, that there was like a guaranteed 1-stroke advantage or something. So I've learned over the years that I have to be very specific about what I say, or else people just, I don't know, maybe they drink too much and they're not paying attention, but they don't take what I say for what it actually means at times. But like a Garcia here, you could use with that sort of a potential weather edge because he's also going to be low owned. He had that ball striking today that we were pointing out before, and he has the positive momentum as well. He shot -3 today after the really rough start to the week. But even with that kind of momentum, he's not going to get the steam like the guys at the top of the board are likely going to get. So that's the kind of lineup construction that I'd be looking at, where you have that baked in for a lot of it, but you still have a Bryson mixed in. You might even have, like, rather than a Daniel Berger in this 8K range, maybe you want to avoid, take somebody that's a little bit higher owned and you throw in a Corey Connors, who is towards the middle end of the pricing, but from the stat perspective is another guy who was really popping off, and you don't want to avoid him in all of your exposure. Maybe up top, you do want to get different, right? You don't want to play a Bryson, and maybe you do want to go all in on this sort of a weather edge. Well, if you wanted to do that, I guess you could use Rory instead of a Bryson. Then in this range, we could go back to Daniel Berger rather than going to the slightly better option, I think, actually, in a Corey Connors. This sort of lineup would be one where you're going all in with the weather edge. And if you're doing that, by the way, ownership is the least of your worries. Like, you're still going to have ownership on players like a McIlroy, a Xander, if you were using this kind of a build specifically. But because you have all these other guys that are going off early and going to be low owned towards the bottom end of your pricing, it's not going to matter at all. Like, you're going to have so many sub 5, 10 percenters in your lineup that it doesn't even matter if you have 25, 30 percenters towards the top. You're going to have plenty of leverage in those other positions. So that's the idea with the lineup construction. Just make sure you have enough leverage. If you're leaning into the weather edge, the job is going to be done for you. If you're going to be a little bit more lax with the weather for tomorrow, like I am, still using some guys towards the middle to the back half, you have to consider the weather, but it's not going to be a terrible slate for it. It's not like the kind of slate where the advantage is towards the later guys, where you'd have to want to go out there and play a lot of chalk. If that was the case, we'd be talking about leaving salary on the table, trying to get different by using lineup construction rather than going to different plays. But we don't have to do that. The potential weather edge as of right now is towards the earlier starters, which is probably the best case scenario that we could have. So that's all I've got for the round 3 live stream, though. We'll see if there's any last second questions in chat. If not, best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. I hope to see your names towards the top end of those GPPs. Make sure to check out my Patreon page and my website for all of my projections for round 3. That'll have my entire player pool on it, projections, and all the player pool tags for the why I'm on each player in my player pool. And make sure to check out SHIPIT Nation in the Stone for all of their projections for tomorrow as well. Mine will be up probably in the next 15, 20 minutes on my website. Just got to add the current scores to it, and I'll be able to upload that for my members. And I already know the SHIPIT Nation crew is hard at work on the Stone, so make sure to stay tuned to their website for all that extra content on top of it. I think it's key to have good projections that you can count on. I know you're getting that with my site. I know you're getting that with the SHIPIT Nation as well, the best projections that you have in the industry out there. It's important to have a good perspective on the slate as well. So that's why I think it's great to have a membership to my website and a site like SHIPIT Nation, because you get my perspective on a slate, my ownership numbers, which are going to differ at times than what you have on other sites. I'll get things right, I get things wrong. It's great to have other resources like the SHIPIT Nation, another bright resource in the community, to use as like the other side of that, right? Like to play devil's advocate on some of those numbers, to give you a more well-rounded look at a slate. They've got Tambo's thoughts over there, Hoop's thoughts. They are some of the best DFS players, period, that we have in the entire DFS industry, giving you your thoughts on every single slate. Just invaluable resources. The stone is worth it alone. It's the absolute nuts there with the SHIPIT Nation. Just nothing but positive stuff I can say there. But other than that, we also are going to have the prop and betting live stream tonight. That, as it is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern time, is where we're going to be going live with that. That'll be on my YouTube channel later on. So that's GSLukeDFS, by the way. That's on YouTube and Twitter. You can find me at GSLukeDFS. We're going to go through underdog. Going to go through some prize pick stuff for round 3, pin locations, stat averages, how the weather will impact all of that for tomorrow. We'll go through some matchups, some 3 balls on the sports books. So if you're on the DraftKings, FanDuel, Hard Rock Bet, all of that, we're going to go through some of the value on those sort of sites. Make sure to check out that a little bit later on. But we'll go through any of these last second questions and we'll move on to tomorrow. Penge deep dive. So yeah, I already gave that one there, Austin. Let me know if you have any other questions. What's going on? Jay Steele. Yeah, I'm with you, Mario. He said, super bummed that Thomas and Reed missed the cut. Yeah, I've got some good lineups too, but I would have had a lot more if those two made it. I guess the one thing that makes me feel better about it, Mario, is that they weren't going to be the nuts even if they made the cut. Like, you have some studs that are doing a whole lot better. So well, right? At least we know now that those lineups are dead. They're not going to tease us for the next few days. Thoughts on Ben Griffin? So let's look at the shots gained. He had a good round today from what I noticed. He had a decent amount of birdies, if memory serves me correctly. So yeah, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, and an eagle on the round. It was a little short game dependent though. So he gained 2.5 strokes with the short game categories. Wasn't terrible though. He still gained in the 2 ball striking categories, but yeah, a little short game dependent for my liking. Smiley Luke, let's go. Dude, Elvis Smiley. I don't know if you guys know that much about him, but he's an absolute beast. He comes over from the DP World Tour. I don't know if he won over there. Let's actually double check on Elvis. Yeah, he did. He won the BMW PGA. Forgot about that way back. But look at this. Win 5th, 14th. Sure, some missed cuts and shit. Whatever. That happens to everyone. But top 10 finish, top 15, and then nearly another top 15 finish for Elvis Smiley. He's another one of those guys to keep an eye on, man. He's a young stud. The shots gained profile, he gained nearly 2 strokes on approach. I don't know. He might be worth a few looks. It's 2 sums off of 1. Good stuff. That's what we want. You said you usually only do showdown, but you decided to do some traditional lineups too. You got to, man. It's a major. Got to run some main slate lineups. I'm all for that. Your single bullet, Billy entry, is a 6 of 6. Dude, good stuff. I got to look at my single entries to see where I stand, but I know I got 1 or 2 going at this point, but that's where you got to have it, right? Let's get some run good for you over the weekend, Jay Steele, and maybe they could take down a contest or 2. That'd be pretty sweet. And you said Marco Penge got banned for 3 months on the DP World Tour for gambling on golf. Dude, you said he's one of us. Okay, guys, I'm playing Penge. I mean, I was already playing Penge. I didn't know this, Mark, but now that you mention it, I remember seeing this in the media. I don't want to say I'm like locking him tomorrow, but that is like the most legendary story for. Was it DFS that he was playing? Imagine if he was playing like DraftKings or something, and that's why I ended up getting banned. We're playing him. Let's put it that way. A lot of things are pointing to him being a good play, but if he's a fellow degenerate, that's just amazing. You looked at Tom Kim before, Max. He is not the best shots gained metrics, and he's a little bit short off the tee, so not my favorite. And it's crazy. And yeah, dude, the 2 sums, just an absolute beauty to hear. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate you guys' support here on the channel. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe so you guys don't miss our live stream there tomorrow.